Hello everyone, welcome back to another talk. A lot of people really like to talk about how people are worse today, or people are better informed today. There's a lot of statements on humanity. Oh, back in my day, people socialized more. Back in my day, people weren't as mean, or, people back in the day were more ignorant, or whatever claims are being made. The age-old generational clash. And each side claims that they're correct, that they know better, right? But they're right. The younger generations typically will make such claims due to such things as, being better informed is a frequent one, or, better technology or better understanding of technology. I'll get into that a little bit later on. Whereas the previous generations make claims of, having seen the world and lived longer and things like that. What if both are partially correct? Well, what do I mean by this? Well, I don't mean like, oh, it applies to some and not to others. You can't apply it to the whole group. That's not what I'm talking about. Let's take a really interesting example. Social media has done a lot of good and bad things to humanity. But one thing it's done is reward two of the worst aspects of humanity. It's rewarded stupidity and villainy. Let's talk stupidity first. Now, there's a streamer who's been arrested in Japan. He's really having a hard time. It looks like he's going to be spending quite some time in jail, and now he's claiming that he'll never come back to Japan and live stream. For the life of me, I can't remember his name. It's like, Johnny Somali or something like that? I don't quite remember the guy's name. And quite frankly, I don't care to, because in terms of content, it's completely worthless content. He just goes around and basically aggravates people in Japan. That's basically all he does. Now, I'm not going to say that he's a representative of, the younger generation is more villainous. No. Because quite frankly, first off, I'm pessimistic and very cynical. I don't think people are inherently good. I think people are inherently selfish. They'll do whatever as long as it doesn't hurt them. And they won't do anything that could cause them to be hurt in response. Okay? And this is the crux of what I think he really personifies here to the general public. I'm going to link this out to broader groups in a bit. But essentially, I don't think he's being an asshole because of social media. I think he's prioritizing the money he can make from being an asshole on the internet over self-preservation, because as he is proving, doing that kind of thing, aggravating people for a long enough period of time, is going to come with consequences, and these consequences are really bad for the long term of your life. He's been punched out, he's been arrested, it's looking like he's very likely going to be spending a decent amount of time in jail, or be banned from Japan, where he's just going to do, he's just going to do the same thing in another country, which might be more dangerous. He wouldn't be able to survive in China if he tried to pull that off, for instance, or any Middle Eastern country, or India, right? That's never going to fly there. Furthermore, he's also just permanently stained his name. Okay, he is going to be bad news wherever he shows up, and he's not going to be able to do this content forever, right? This isn't a career. This is a flash in the pan, and if he's got any brains in him, which I, at this point, personally doubt, he's putting away that money, because if he's spending that money, or he's not investing or otherwise saving it, he's going to be broke in 10 years. Okay? Because no one's going to want to hire him because of the bad publicity attached to his name. And you can't run this kind of content forever. Eventually the well dries up for this kind of shock content, right? It has a short-term content path. And it's really hard to pivot into a positive one with after such bad publicity has been put on your name, as several other content creators have proven with similar levels of infamy, right? JStation is a prime example. But because he's making money out of it, what normally would prevent him from doing that in society, which would be his long-term health and financial security, I guess I would say, because he's making money at this point right here, he's making money, he's getting attention, social media has incentivized him to ignore that, right? It has incentivized him to be an asshole. And that is very much the crux of what's changed about humanity, right? Well, one of the things, there's been several things, but it's one of the bigger things. Social media has incentivized a variety of bad behaviors because they get rewarded, at least in the short term. I used Johnny Somali as an example, but how many con artists do you think use social media to push their scams, whether it's an MLM or it's a crypto scam or some pyramid scheme, investment scam, whatever, right? While there is, of course, the natural potential consequences of getting caught and criminally charged, which has happened to a variety of the people who have pulled this, especially in more recent years, I should say, the incentivization, the ability to make a bag, as they call it, is strong enough to overcome that level of preservation. All right, it's incentivizing a wider group of people, right? It's kind of like, say, stagecoach robberies in the Old West of America, right? They used to be really common, and then stagecoaches started getting better and better guards and being guarded by more guys. And soon, in order to take on a stagecoach, you would need 5 men, right? At minimum, if not more. Same thing with robbing a train. It was, at first really easy when people didn't have any kind of defenses, and then as they started getting guards and everything, lo and behold, train robberies eventually stopped because it was just too difficult. The consequences were too great. And, the people guarding these stagecoaches and trains, if they shot a would-be robber, they got, no charges at all. It was like, okay, he was trying to rob the thing, the vehicle, the transport, whatever it happens to be. So, yeah, good job. Here's a, clap on the back and a gold star for your efforts. And a couple hundred in a bonus, because you warded off this vagabond. While you can't really do that today, not quite, it's the same kind of mentality that's being, used on the internet. A lot of people have claimed that the internet is no longer like the Wild Wild West. It still kind of is. This is all tantamount to, robbing a train or a stagecoach. You're looking at people making dangerous decisions, which is, either harassing people on live stream or trying to pull some kind of scam. And the consequences are pretty severe. You were looking at jail time. I mean, look at Sam Bankman-Fried, right? And that's part of the reason why that case was so widely publicized. It's upgrading the level of protection on our stagecoaches and our trains, essentially, right? And advertising the fact, look, if you're going to rob our stagecoach or if you're going to scam the public, you need to think about these consequences now, right? But there will always be people who will step up and see the short-term allure and make the same stupid decisions. These are going to be typically younger people who don't typically forecast into the future. Okay? Why that is, I couldn't tell you. Whether it's because they haven't fully developed as people, they don't have long-term plans, or because they're more depressed than before, and they don't intend to have long-term plans, which I've seen several people on social media reference before. Whatever the reason is, they're not planning out for the long term. They're not planning out typically past 5-ish years, right? So they're going to be prioritizing that short term and accepting these consequences because in their minds, these short-term gains that social media offers is going to be better reward for them anyways, because back before social media existed, no one was going around Japan ever and just harassing random Japanese people unless they were drunk, right? But no one was doing it intentionally, fully consciously. No one was doing that anywhere in the world, just going around and deliberately harassing random people, because there were consequences. You would get, again, punched out for nothing. You weren't gaining anything from harassing people on the street, but you did face a potential consequence of getting punched out or getting arrested for disturbing the peace or what have you. But with social media, now there's an incentive. There's money. There's attention. There's fame, right? There's suddenly an incentive. And people, therefore, will do it now. Anything that is incentivized for them to do, that they become rewarded for in some way, someone's going to step up and do. It's just a matter of how low will you go to achieve that, right? I mean, it's kind of the same thing with Twitch, as another example. They just made nudity a lot more accepted officially on the platform. Well, technically it's unofficially because they kind of rolled it back, but anyways, nudity is slowly becoming more and more accepted, and the consequences of, say, being naked on Twitch, man or woman, is that that's going to pretty permanently attach to your online reputation, and that's going to to some extent bleed over into your real life somehow, right? Amaranth, if you think Amaranth, for instance, is going to get away completely from what I'll just call titty streaming to oversimplify it, she's not. That's, for better or for worse, that's going to follow her. But the consequences is, we're not seeing them now, but we might, or she might see them in the future. Right? Same thing with any guys that are doing the same thing, because I know there are a lot of guys jumping on the naked bandwagon on Twitch to limited success, but they're doing so, right? And, this isn't a criticism of these people, right? But think even early on in the days of the internet, no one was doing that, right? Nobody was, live streaming themselves naked, even in the early days of live streaming, because there would be consequences. They'd be banned. They wouldn't get as much money, right? There were consequences, but Twitch is removing those consequences, and therefore the same incentive to live stream the incentives remain the same, right? You're looking at attention, you're looking at money, same as everyone else who live streams. The difference is that the consequences are being diminished by Twitch itself, but those consequences being diminished are very much a result of social media, okay? Very much about that. So, frankly, at the end of the day, social media is either typically it incentivizes bad behavior via attention and money, okay? That's one really big change, right? Because even, old movies, old TV shows, they didn't have naked people on them because that would very much follow that actor or actress for the duration of their careers, unless it was done for comedy or whatever. There were some limited exceptions, but it was never sexualized nudity, right? Like it is on Twitch. Because that's all sexualized nudity. Some people deny it, but it's sexualized, right? Because the repercussions back in the day were higher. It would follow you more, right? There was less sexualization of things back then because advertising wasn't quite as out of control as it is today, right? Your personal reputation as a star mattered because there were fewer stars. Nowadays, pretty much anybody with a stroke of luck can become a star. So there's more competition, right? If you think dream stands, for instance, are following the lives and shenanigans of major Hollywood movie stars as closely as they're following Dream, Flash, they're not. They might kind of pay attention to that, but their favorite is Dream, and he's not in Hollywood, right? In many ways, you could argue that he's, frankly, bigger than a lot of people in Hollywood, right? Same thing with Taylor Swift. She's not in Hollywood. Huge singer, although that's not too unusual. I mean, consider Elvis in his career compared, to his contemporaries. Absolutely massive. But, again, the consequences would have been really severe. I mean, consider if, say, Elvis at a live show dropped his pants, right? That would totally change how people saw him. You might, by default, think, oh, yeah, the women would love that. Would they, though? They liked him because, not just because he was a good singer and because he was considered handsome for that time, because, of course, standards change, but also because he had this very much, romantic Romeo type thing, and say he did a nudie or something like that, that would change him from this romantic kind of sensual guy, not sexual, sensual, which is different, into just this sex thing, right? And that would completely, I think that would have really significantly damaged his reputation, obviously, but also his career, right? And it's the same thing. Again, we're pulling away those consequences for the same thing happening on Twitch, basically. The very same scenario in which Elvis dropped his pants and damaged his reputation and career, that's happening on Twitch right now, okay? These people who do this are locking themselves into that content path, all right? Whether they realize it or not. And there's going to be long-term consequences for that, right? And there's no getting around that. It's just a matter of, how acceptable you find the consequences and how much the incentive outweighs those consequences. For a lot of these people, the incentives are outweighing the consequences, and part of that is because a lot of people are, the economy is not great. Okay, let's be really brutally honest. So money is a more powerful incentive than it used to be when the economy was stronger, right? So we also have that. But we also, of course, have the most significant problem I think social media has incentivized. Lying. Lying is easy, okay? Lying is the easiest thing in the world. Everything I've said up till now could be a total lie, and it would be a matter of whether or not you believe me. Coin flip, right? Social media, though, allows you to get paid for lying. People typically lie when they get something out of it. Back before social media, if you were lying, it was either to get promoted at your work, cheat on your spouse, or to look better in the eyes of your neighbors, people you interacted with on a daily basis. You were limited exclusively to interacting with the people in your, regular life. And the interesting thing with both cheating and lying to get promoted is a lot of the times you're going to get caught. Not every time, obviously. There's going to be those clever devils who don't get caught, but for the most part, people are going to get caught. If you lie your way into a promotion at the office, say, it's a matter of time before somebody realizes you don't actually know what you're doing, right? At least not completely, if at all. There's always evidence of cheating somewhere, right? Whether it's somebody's camera, whether it's somebody recognizing you somewhere else, right? That's basically how the whole cheating scandal with Ned Fulmer came about, right? Somebody recognized them in public and took a picture, right? Well, even back before social media, it was entirely possible to do that. You would just assumedly be having to carry a camera, which some people did back then, or alternatively, you just saw the person and you told their spouse about him, and there's no real reason to lie about that back then because there was no social media fame, there was no monetizing of that. There was no putting someone on blast and getting likes and advertising attention, right? But that's changed. Social media has made that a bit more of a big deal. Now, the Ned Fulmer situation is a bit different because the people who put him on blast originally were not doing it for money, they were doing it for attention and genuine concern. It was a mixture of both. What that mixture specifically consisted of, I'll never know, because that's only in the mind of the person who originally posted it. But it was a combination of media attention and genuine concern, because they did also privately message his wife with the photo as well. But you have just absolute. I mean, look at the Paul brothers, who cheated on several past girlfriends, when they were younger, and they rolled that into media attention, social media attention. I mean, look at which I don't remember which Paul brother it was, but who married Tana. I can never pronounce her last name. Tana Mongeau. I don't remember her last name pronunciation because it sounds different every time somebody says it. But Tana, whatever, right? His fake marriage to her. Social media attention. The whole thing was a complete lie. But again, going back to other previous examples, trying to set up a scam. That's all lies. Pyramid schemes? Lying through your teeth. There have been a variety of content creators who've lied about who they were behind the scenes, whose reputation has... whose lies eventually caught up with them, but lying was profitable to them because it maintained their online reputation, which allowed them to attract eyeballs, right? Creepshow Art, great example. Absolute stalker lunatic behind the scenes. But when confronted, she initially lied, right? She got hacked or whatever her claim was, and, her whole career, basically, she lied about what was going on behind the scenes. She lied about who she was. The point here is that people haven't really changed, right? By and large. People are still just as unpleasant as they were 50, 70, 100 years ago. It's just that before, there wasn't any incentive to do some of the stuff we see the kids do today, right? We have... people committing crimes on video to get social media attention. Nobody was doing that 70 years ago. If they stole something, it was, maybe for the thrills, but they sure as hell weren't advertising it in the local newspaper, right? Because that was going to get them arrested, and that was a consequence. But the incentive of getting social media attention, and maybe spinning that into a social media career, is a strong enough incentive for a lot of people, particularly younger people, for them to either ignore or overlook the consequences of the actions, right? Again, people committing crimes and recording it and posting it to social media, they don't do that because they want to get caught. They do that because the consequence of getting caught is outweighed by the incentive of getting a lot of media attention, and in their idealized world, spinning that into a career that makes them rich, right? That's the incentive. Whereas before, if you were stealing, let's take a classic example. Let's say 70 years ago, some boys were stealing a car, right? Now, when they were stealing a car, they could do so for a joyride, in which point they would abandon the car, or they would sell it for money, which would be the classical money motive. But the decision to steal that car and sell it for scrap, say, is a significantly riskier decision because the consequences were just as severe as they are today, but the gains weren't as high. The potential gains weren't as high. If you've ever tried to sell a junker, it's not going to sell for that much, right? It really isn't, compared to what it was originally bought for. So there isn't a whole lot of gain for that level of risk, right? But with social media, there's been a number of people who have successfully spun bad behavior into successful media careers and become very wealthy. The Paul brothers are probably the most widely known example, and probably the worst offender in terms of inspiring kids to be unpleasant or otherwise making bad decisions on the internet in the hopes of becoming a second Paul brother, basically, a second Paul Logan or whatever. Right? It's the same idea as stealing the car, but the potential gains is more than just selling that junker or doing it for thrills. Okay? It's now, we could record this and maybe spin this into a career. Now, which, if that works, gets you a lot of money. That's what's changed. The behavior of people hasn't changed, but before, the consequences outweighed the incentives, so a lot of people, when thinking about doing an action, decided against it. Right? But that's changing not because the consequences have changed, because the consequences haven't changed, really, in most of these cases. There are a couple of cases in which it has. Crypto scams, for example, have huge consequences, bigger consequences than your average run-of-the-mill scam, but anyways, well, sometimes, but anyways, you're looking at increased incentives. Social media has made acting like a fool or otherwise being an asshole profitable on the internet. More profitable, or let me rephrase that, profitable enough that the usual barriers, the usual, fear of consequences is erased. Alright, that's what's changed. People haven't, but social media has simply incentivized, financially, the worst aspects of humanity. Alright? That's what's really, the big problem. And to sort of equally connect this to, say, another really interesting topic is the topic of, information. Well, no, I might handle that at a different time. This has been a nice, decent conversation. We'll leave this here. With that being said, thank you all very much for listening. If you liked this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please ignore me. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, or requests, please leave them down in the comment section below. And thank you all very much for joining me, and have a great 24 hours.